You take a beam of light coming from a source, you hit it through a half silver mirror, half of it goes up and then comes back down, the other half goes through and comes back. You have a mirror there, and you have a mirror there. You combine the light, and this is meant to be a human eye or an observer. You combine the light and you view it over here. What you actually get is this. Let's just assume that the ether wind is flowing this way. Alright? Light is coming from here, so it's in the same phase. The light then splits up into two parts. One goes up and comes down, the other one goes across and comes down. Because this guy is actually traveling through and against ether, this will be slowed down more than this guy. So when these guys actually go and come back, this light will come slightly before this guy, giving you an interference pattern. As you move this around, what will happen is, now this guy comes here, so then this guy is going to be going through and against ether, and this guy won't be affected. So then this guy will actually be delayed more than this guy. So as I rotate the apparatus, the interference pattern will change. And that is what the Michelson-Morley experiment was actually trying to do. Now, the result was that there was actually no change in the interference pattern. They did this experiment, they rotated the apparatus, and they could not find any change in the actual experiment. Other versions of the experiment were carried out with increasing sophistication, but again, they could not find a change in the interference pattern. Some people proposed that the Earth actually carried the ether with it. This theory was rejected. Another possible explanation was by Lawrence Fitzgerald, that actually said that all objects physically contract in the direction of motion. Again, that was rejected as well. And then the other things were things like the motion through the ether actually distorts the apparatus. And because the apparatus itself gets distorted, you do not see the interference pattern. Today, Einstein's theory of relativity is actually considered to be the solution of this null result. But at that point in time, ether was this concept that had existed for a long time, and people just accepted and believed it. And Michelson-Morley experiment, because it could not find any change in the interference pattern, it sort of led to the conclusion that ether in fact did not exist. Now this was a very, very significant experiment, because if ether existed, it could be used as an absolute frame of reference, and possibly Einstein might not have come up with his theory of relativity. Now, the experiment itself was actually based on very sound science. Light was a transverse wave, and at that time transverse waves were required to a medium to propagate through. The principle that this thing was based on was interference, which was actually very well understood. The experiment itself was meticulously designed. Michelson and Morley were famous for designing very, very accurate experiments. All the variables, experiment variables, were actually identified and controlled. What they did was they floated this entire apparatus on a bed of mercury, and they did that to eliminate any vibrations, because vibrations would cause issues with the interference pattern. They repeated this experiment at several places on the Earth and as several times as the Earth orbited the Sun, and all attempts to explain the null result were actually rejected. So eventually, as I said, it led to the conclusion that there in fact was no ether, and what the Michelson-Morley experiment demonstrated was that the speed of light is dependent of the motion of the source or the observer. And you could argue that it ultimately led to Einstein's theory of special relativity. That is all for today. Thank you.